mind just telling us your first name?
Yeah, Jason?
Can you start with telling us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, so my childhood, it was full of love growing up. I was really close with my parents. Both of them were up in age when they had me, so I was kind of that surprise child, the last of five. My dad's first child, so he idolized me, carried me everywhere. I tell people I probably didn't learn how to walk until I was 8 or 9 years old because I was carried everywhere. And then suddenly everything changed overnight when my dad passed away when I was 11. He had dealt with colorectal cancer, and it took him from us very rapidly. It was about a 3 month period. And I remember making a promise to him in the hospital that I would be the man of the house and that I would take care of mom as he was dying. And that was a promise I held with me. That kind of ended my childhood right there when I was 11 because I had to be an adult now. I had to take care of my mom, who was up in age and was dealing with medical issues of her own. And with my siblings, there was a huge age gap. So it was kind of just me. And it was me there to take care of mom and to make sure she was okay. So I remember just a beautiful childhood up until the cancer kind of ravaged us all in when I was 11.
Awesome. When you were a kid, even going through all that, did you have any dreams or aspirations as a child?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a horse racing jockey. So my dad owned race horses when I was growing up, and we spent a lot of time out at the track. And that was my dream. I wanted to just ride horses and do that for a living. But unfortunately, I grew too tall by the time I was in third grade. So that dream went out the window. But after that, I had set sights on running my dad's company. He had started an asphalt paving company from nothing. He moved to Illinois uh, from Kentucky with just a sixth grade education, and he started this business from nothing. And it was my dream to take it over one day, and that was the plan. And I just looked forward to carry on his legacy and to make him proud.
Would you mind just telling us more about your relationship with your dad? And then I know he passed away while you were young, and maybe how that relationship helped you moving forward.
Yeah, so he was my hero. He was my everything. So I mentioned my mom had four kids from a previous marriage. My dad was 46 when I was born, and he didn't think he was going to get to be a dad. So when he had a son of his own, he cherished every minute with me. And he was just the type of guy that would walk into a room and everybody wanted to be his friend. He just always had the newest joke to tell that was most of the time inappropriate, but back then I just thought it was hilarious. But we were just best friends. I could tell him everything. I remember nights laying in bed. We were so close that we actually kicked my mom out of her poor master bedroom because I would sleep with my dad at night. And that was my opportunity to just talk with him one on one and tell him about a bad day at school or just just to cry if bullies were making fun of me or something. He was just always there to talk with me. And after he passed away, that was very hard to lose that connection and to lose that outlet. But I just thought about the way that he always touched people, the way that he always opened his heart, and the way that he loved people. And I tried to do that in his passing to try to carry on his legacy any way I could. And I still, to this very day, everything I do, I think of Dad. I think of what Dad would want me to do. And it's pretty incredible because now in my recovery, I've been able to reconnect with him at night. And we still have those nightly conversations. It's just he's not physically there anymore, but we can still communicate.
What about your relationship with your mom and how that relationship?
Yeah, so I refer to us as the odd couple because here I was a teenage boy and she was a senior citizen, grandma. I actually have nephews that are older than me, so she was grandma and I was just this young boy, but she was an incredible lady because she raised five of us. She became a mom when she was 16, and she was still a mom in her 60s raising a young kid. So she was always the cool mom. She was able to adjust to all the different generations. She went from the hippies to the millennials and everything in between. And I loved her to death. She was always in poor health, but she was my priority. She was the one that I took care of. She suffered debilitating anxiety attacks, and I was there to always comfort her. And I could go to her with anything. I remember the first night I got drunk, and I called her up crying, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Like, I can't believe I did this. And she just told me to stay where I was, and the next morning she made sure to rub it in my face. She didn't discipline me, she just kind of let the alcohol and the hangover do the disciplining instead. But that's just the type of lady she was. She was, after Dad passed away, we had each other to rely on, and it really made us close.
What are the biggest things you learned from both of your parents?
Hmm. The biggest thing that I learned from them was to enjoy the small things in life. They both came from nothing, and they taught me a deep appreciation. I was fortunate enough to grow up having a lot because of my dad's company, but they never flaunted it or threw it in people's face. They were always just down to earth, humble people, and I learned that from them to just appreciate the small things. I think of my mom's love for Christmas and how our house would look like a forest full of Christmas trees, and that's something I replicate now. It's just those little occasions and those little things that just make day-to-day life more enjoyable. And it's through that appreciation for the small things that I've been able to heal and recover over the years.
Could you tell us about your first love and how that felt? It's whatever you associate as your first love. It can be a person, a hobby, a sport, anything that you think would be your first love.
Hmm. That's a good one. I would have to say my dog Bullwinkle. He was, I adopted him, let's see, about 2 years before my mom passed away. I was in high school still. And at the time, she didn't want to get another dog. She was still heartbroken about the dog that had passed away, my childhood dog that had passed away. And the rebel that I went ahead and just went to the store, found a friend that was 18 so we could go ahead and make the adoption. And lo and behold, Bullwinkle came running in the door that night, the little Chihuahua mix that he was. And I remember the first night I had him, I couldn't sleep because I was worried I was going to just roll over and smother him in bed. And I never realized at that time when I adopted him that he would be my family, because after my mom passed away, he was all I had. And I did everything I could to take care of him. If that meant that I couldn't afford dinner that night for myself, I made sure that he still had kibble in his bowl. And I would leave work early when our air conditioning was or our electric was shut off, because I wanted to drive him around in the car so he wouldn't get overheated at home. And that little guy lived to be 13 years old, and it was just, he was my last connection with my mom. Because it's funny, the last thing she told me in the hospital room was to make sure to let Bullwinkle out. And those words just kind of stuck with me forever. So I loved him to death, and he carried me from losing my mom to meeting my husband. And he was just that bridge and that love and just everything for me for a very long time.
What about your first loss or heartbreak and how that felt?
Yeah, so that was my dad, and that was when I was 11, and it was terrifying because I had seen him just as a superhero my entire life. And then all of a sudden, he started having these back pains, and it just seemed normal. He worked construction, so figured it was just long days at work. And then to see it just ravage his body like that, just it really scared me, and it really made me realize that we're all very vulnerable and that we all can die at or that we all will die at one point. And I think that was a big wake up call because it kind of stole my innocence. It stole that naive childlike mind that I still had, and that's when I realized that loss can be permanent. I guess there was always a part of me up until that point that thought people die but they come back. And it was after my dad died and he didn't come back that I realized it was final, and it was a deep pain that I carried with me for a very long time because I wanted to be the man of the house, and I thought being the man of the house meant you had to always look strong and that you could show your emotions. So I hid that pain inside for a very long time.
How did that feel growing up, being 11 years old and suppressing your own emotions and not being able to be yourself and kind of taking that responsibility and burden of being the quote unquote man of the house and thinking you had to do it a certain way? Like, how was that?
It felt like I was wearing a mask. It felt like I was a character in some show and that I was no longer myself
Mm.
because I would have these feelings inside and I couldn't express them to anyone. I know mom was always there for me, but it was difficult because she was a woman and here I was, a boy entering puberty, becoming a man, and there were a lot of things that I couldn't talk to her about. And especially growing up overweight and having to deal with bullies at school and stuff, I just became the tough guy. And I oftentimes used joking or aggression as ways to kind of mask everything. And I would either be the funny guy, or if something would set me off, I'd be the angry guy. But I was never the hurt guy. So there was a lot of inner conflict and a lot of inner anxiety. And it caused me to kind of masquerade around, and I had to script my life. Every single interaction I had, I would think about it and pre-plan it just so I could ensure that I didn't let my guard down.
How does it feel to not live in that shell anymore?
It's awesome. It's awesome. It is the most freeing feeling I've ever experienced. It's like I was able to reconnect with that child I was before my dad passed away. And being in recovery and breaking free of that mask that I wore for so long has allowed me to love myself for who I am and develop deeper relationships with my friends and those around me because they only got to see the tip of the iceberg of Jason for a very long time. But once I was finally able to break free and get out of that shell, I was able to really show them my authentic self.
Who would you say first taught you love and how?
My husband Matt, he rescued me. He's my hero because when we met, his life was on the upswing. He had the whole world in front of him, was traveled around the world, and he had clear career goals, and he was just in a stable place. Meanwhile, here I was dealing with homelessness and eviction and arrest, and all of these things were happening in my life, and I couldn't understand what he saw in me, why he would even want to be with me. And it was just his willingness and his selflessness to give to me and to take care of me and to allow me that time to grow, and the potential that he saw within me, that I realized what love truly was. I had thought I had experienced it with my parents, but I think at that point I was so young. As a kid, you don't really understand the different dynamics that go into love. But meeting Matt as an adult and just him basically laying down his life for me and to just give me whatever I needed to help me get back on my feet was something that was truly magical.
What's love to you now versus what it was to you when you were a kid? How do those two different loves compare, and what's the different feel to both of them?
Yeah, so love now for me is just that willingness to be present for someone and to give them space and to just embrace them. And as a child, it wasn't that complicated. As a child, it was kind of just love is protection. I kind of looked at my parents as loving me, as protecting me from, the monster under my bed or the storms outside or whatever the bullies had said at school. And now I realize that love is a lot more than just protection. It's about just being there for someone through the good and through the bad, and just giving yourself to them. We oftentimes, I think, just worry about me, 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 but love is about anything else than me. It's about you and it's about the other person, and just showing them that you value them and that you're empathetic with them. I think empathy is another huge key to love, and that's been something that I've been working on through my recovery.
How do you show yourself that you love yourself?
Yeah, so it was crazy. When I was at the height of my eating disorder, I had no love for myself. And I thought that I was just a huge disappointment to myself and to my family and my friends. And when I started recovery, my therapist asked me to write a letter because I didn't know how I was going to tell my friends. I thought they might see me as a fraud, as a liar for all these kind of false truths or half truths I had shown them for so long. And I wrote that story and then I read it back to myself. And while reading it back to myself, I saw my life from an objective point of view, from a third person point of view, and I felt sympathy for that person. I felt love for that person. And it was in that moment that everything changed. That's when I was finally able to love myself again. And to me, that just means taking the time to embrace my emotions and to be myself and to not worry about what other people think. I think I spent so long trying to please everybody else that I forgot about myself. And loving myself is that ability to take that space. And whether that's just a 20-minute walk in the morning or, eating dessert after dinner, just something to show myself that I'm loved.
What's a good day look like for you?
A good day for me is a day free of anxiety. It's a day free of worry. I had way too many of them that I lived inside my comfort zone and inside a box where anxiety called the shots. And now a good day for me is just getting out of that comfort zone and just living my life to the fullest. I just recently started indoor rock wall climbing, which to me that is just something that old Jason would have never done. But to me, that's a good day. Whenever I can try something new and hop outside of my comfort zone.
What about a bad day and how you get through that bad day?
So, a bad day is when I don't meet my expectations, and I have a tendency to place unrealistically high expectations on myself. So, that's something I'm working on. But there are still those days when, I'll let the littlest thing just set me off, and I'll express my emotion as anger when that's really not the emotion I'm feeling. That's just my default. That's what my default had been for so long. And when I notice that I fall into those old habits, I give myself that space now, and I will write in my journal, or I'll do some breath work or meditate, or just take some time to reconnect with myself and get to the root of the problem. And rather than let a bad day get me down and let me feel defeated, I think about tomorrow. I have hope for tomorrow that it will be better, that I can take whatever hardships I face today and turn them into lessons so that I can improve myself moving forward. I think about just a couple days ago, we were celebrating my husband's birthday, and we stopped off for ice cream. And I wasn't able to do it. I wasn't able to eat the ice cream because I'm still so early on in my recovery that there are still those trigger events that happen. And that would have been an event that just a couple months ago would have just derailed my entire weekend because I would have dwelled on the fact that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And instead, I woke up and the next morning I was like, I'm going to have one hell of a good breakfast because I caved last night. So it's just that perseverance. It's just that saying it's okay to fail. It's okay to have a bad day, but I'm going to change it in the future.
What's a person or an event that shaped you, good or bad? How does it feel when you reflect on that person or event?
Yeah, so I think about a friend that I had named Kyle, and he was a very toxic friend for me. He came along right around the time my mom was sick and kind of introduced me into a life of drugs and a life of partying that I hadn't seen before. I was the super honor roll kind of kid, the goody goody Sunday school teacher, everything's just perfect with me. And all of a sudden, I was like this party kid, and he just kind of manipulated me and took advantage of me because I so desperately wanted a male influence in my life after losing my dad. I wanted to just be accepted by men. And I thought catering to him and doing the things he wanted me to do, giving into that peer pressure, would make me cool, would make me a man. And that relationship ended up costing me a lot of time, a lot of money, and it destroyed me because when he just left me one day, it really hurt. I felt abandoned again. I felt that loss that I had felt when I lost my parents or had the falling out with my siblings. And I just think about that relationship, how long it held me back because I kind of judged myself based upon the way he treated me. And I recently wrote a letter to him. I'll never send it probably, and who knows if he'll watch this, probably not. But I've realized now that through that, I grew. I realized that that is not the type of guy I want to be, and that is not the type of lifestyle I want to be associated with. And I'm actually glad he put me through that hell because I came out a whole lot stronger.
What's inspired you?
Making connections. It's incredible the connections I've been able to make with my husband, with my friends, and with complete strangers since sharing my truths. And that inspires me so much because I realize that we are all one community and we rely on each other. We need each other so much more, I think, than any of us even realize. And that gives me hope because I see myself in other people and I see them in me. And that is just, it's a great feeling to wake up with every day because it just it makes me realize I'm not alone. And I think I spent a majority of my life thinking I was alone. And now to have these connections, it's just a total inspiration for me.
What's been a humbling experience for you? How did that experience feel?
A humbling experience was sharing the news of my eating disorder and my battle with my friends and my close family. I alluded to it earlier, but I felt like I would be a fraud, that I'm a perfectionist, I'm an overachiever. So to say that I had something wrong and that I had been battling it for 15 years was extremely humbling. Writing that text message or making that phone call, I just remember my hands shaking and I was just scared. I just felt like I had spent so long living this lie, living this character who I truly wasn't. And it was extremely humbling to tell them this. And it turned out to be the most rewarding experience of my life because the feedback was incredible. People recognized that I had been in survival mode for so long, and they recognized the challenges that I had been facing. And while it was the most humbling thing I've ever experienced, it was also the most, I guess, the thing that allowed me to grow the most and just the most rewarding experience.
So the next question is, if you could go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Tell me about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war.
So I think of the relationship I have with my siblings. After my mom passed away, we fell apart. Our family had been so close growing up. We all got together for the holidays. We went on family vacations together. I was proud to be Uncle Jason to all those nieces and nephews that were my age because my family was so messed up when it came to ages and generations. But things changed after mom died. Greed, I think, got the best of us. Grief got the best of us. I had changed. I was going through that party phase, and my siblings saw that. And with them being older, they, I think, tried to step in and be my parents rather than be my siblings. And that's who I needed at that point. I didn't need parents. I needed my siblings. And it ripped our family apart. We spent 7 years in and out of court. And to me, that was just a war that seemed like it was never going to end. I watched my dad's company get sold, and that dream that I had to carry on his legacy ripped out from underneath me. I got kicked out of my childhood home because they wanted to sell it as quickly as they could. And I never had a chance to grieve. So it was devastating for me to see these people that I had trusted, that I had loved, and to feel like I was at war with them. It made me look upon my childhood and question, was this all fake? Was this really authentic? Did they really care about me? And it made it difficult to go to memories for comfort. I think a lot of times when we lose someone, we rely on our memories for nostalgia and for comfort. But when I would go and look at my memories, all I could think about was the broken relationships I had with my siblings. So rather than comfort, I felt pain. And it's taken us a long time, and I don't think we'll ever completely heal. I keep them at at arm's length right now. I slowly let them back into my life, but unfortunately, it just created more pain. And it's hard because I think there's a stigma out there where when people aren't close to their family, you question them. You think something's wrong with them. And in my situation, I just had to come to the realization that those relationships were toxic for me, and that I can appreciate the time that we did have together, and I can appreciate knowing that they're there in some capacity, but we're never going to be close. We're never going to be that close-knit family that we were before mom passed away.
How was the internal struggle in that war more so? And then, since you didn't have an opportunity to grieve at that time, have you been able to grieve after, and how did that letting that out feel?
Yeah, so the internal struggle for me kind of centered back upon a conversation I had with my sister right before mom passed away. And she called me up one night. I was going out with my friends to just kind of relax, just to have a good time, to be 19 again. And I made sure that mom was in the care of my sister, my oldest sister, and that she would be all right. Well, my other sister called me and was just livid with me. She couldn't believe that I had abandoned mom, that I was being so selfish to leave her. And in that conversation, she called me a disappointment. And this sister had been super close with me growing up. She was one of my best friends and my idols. So to hear her say that I was a disappointment just stuck with me throughout the war that would start after mom passed away. And I had to deal with that every single day. I would look at my life and sit there in an apartment with no electricity, or an apartment with an eviction notice on the door, or eventually in the back of a cop car. And those thoughts would go through my head. I would think, yep, you are a disappointment. And that was an internal battle that I faced up until last year. That it was constantly telling me inside of my head that I was a disappointment because my life didn't pan out the way I thought it was going to, that I hadn't achieved those dreams I had as a child. And it was just, it was an internal struggle that I think allowed this eating disorder and allowed my OCD and anxiety to just rage for so long. And then as far as grieving for mom, I finally had that chance just a couple months ago. My therapist had asked me to write a letter to her. And this is why I say everybody needs to go to therapy. Even if you don't think you do, you uncover things about yourself that you didn't even know existed. And over the course of a conversation with my therapist, he goes, you never had a chance to grieve your mom. He's like, why don't you write a letter for her? So I wrote a letter eulogizing my mom. And it was in that letter that I was finally able to grieve. And it was 16 years after she passed away. but I was finally able to celebrate the woman that she was, the relationship we shared, and I finally got to say goodbye. I finally got to let her know the man that I had grown up to be. And that was something I think that had haunted me for a long time because I had thought that I was a disappointment. And in this letter, I was able to show her everything I have been able to accomplish and overcome. And when I finished typing out that letter, I knew she was proud of me. I knew she was smiling down on me. And I was finally able to let go of that pain and that grief that had just hung over my life for 16 years.
So same type of question. I don't know if these two are connected, but this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Tell me about a time that you can relate to the word peace.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about I'm thinking about the last year. I just feel like I have been on a physical, a mental, and a spiritual journey. I feel like it's all three in one because I've been able to get my life back. I've been able to come to terms with the broken relationships I have with my siblings and accept it for the way that it is. I've been able to realize that I'm not a disappointment and that a lot of those things that happened to me, I was simply doing the best I could. And that's something that a guy that I'm in a men's group with told me just a couple weeks ago. He said, whenever you feel overwhelmed, just take that deep breath and say, I'm doing the best I can. And it's it seems so simple, but it's really life changing because it brings me that inner peace. It allows me to get rid of those unrealistically high expectations that I have, and it allows me to put to bed those insecurities and those fears that haunted me for so long. And I would just say that this last year, this journey that I've been on since I came to terms with my eating disorder and with the unresolved pain and grief of losing my parents, that I've finally been able to find peace. And I wake up every morning with a clear head and an eye to the future. I had lost sight of my future during the middle of that war. And now I see the future again, and it looks bright and it has hope. And to me, that is what peace is all about.
So the next question is if you can tell us about a truly difficult time in your life, how that time felt, and how you endured.
Yeah, so I think about living in the apartment. I was probably 25 or so at the time, and I couldn't pay the rent. I was working full time, but half of my paycheck was going to the train trip downtown just to get to work. And the rest of it was going to car insurance and this and that. And my rent fell behind, and then my electric bill fell behind. And it was Memorial Day weekend that I received a notice that they were going to be shutting off my electric. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Chicago gets really hot and humid in the summer. So the thought of not having electricity and air conditioning over the course of the summer was just a horrible experience. It was something I would not wish upon anybody. I sat in that apartment and I gave up hope. I stopped taking the dogs out. So I was just surrounded by dog poop and urine all over the floor. I would sit on the floor and look out the window to the parking lot and see my neighbors across the way. And their life just seemed so perfect. They had lights on, they had each other, they had love. I didn't have any of that. I felt so alone. I wasn't talking with my family. I couldn't really share the struggles that were going on in my life with my friends. And it was just the most isolating experience of my life, and just one of them where I felt the words "I'm a disappointment" just echo over and over again. And I survived that summer. I don't know how. I look back and I don't know how, but there was always that part of me telling me it's going to get better. I just trusted that. I saw what my parents had been through. I saw how they had gone from nothing and made something of it. And I realized that this was my journey now too, that I was at that nothing point and that I could make something out of it one day. And I got the eviction notice just a couple months later. I didn't know where I was going to live. Luckily, one of my friend's grandparents allowed me to move into their farmhouse for a little bit, and I slept on a couch. And I was able to get back up on my feet from that. And just a couple months later, I would end up meeting Matt, who, as I said, was my savior. He was the one who came along and just gave me that stability in such a turbulent time. But I look back at that and I can't believe I survived. I can't believe I made it through those sleepless nights, those dark days, and I persevered.
Um, Going through all that and then making it through that, were you? Did you start your recovery while you were going through that? Were you already in recovery? How did those two things?
Yeah, so by that point, but when I started recovery, that time was pretty well past me at that point. That was probably about 10 years ago now, and I started recovery last year. And I think part of the reason why recovery started when it did is because life was going good, but there was that fear that I was going to lose it all.
Yeah.
I just wanted so badly to control the situation.
So the Chicago, which you just did, this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, so congratulations. That's a long relationship. And then the recovery was a year ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Chicago was 10 years ago. Recovery was a year ago. Kind of right at the height of the pandemic is when my eating disorder also kind of hit its height because I was looking for control. I had had a health scare of my own just a couple years before where the doctors thought I could have colorectal cancer. And to have that same thing happen to me that I had seen destroy my dad just 20 years earlier scared me to death. And that's kind of when the eating disorder really started to spiral out of control. And then really everything hit the fan last July. And ironically, it was Independence Day, July 4th, that I realized I needed help. And that was the day that I started my road to independence.
Nice. How's that recovery been?
It's a process. It's a journey. I wrote in my recovery journal a mantra that says, trust the process, embrace the process, and eventually enjoy the process. And that has gotten me through some tough days, some great days. It keeps me centered. It keeps me level because like I said, I celebrate the small things. The other day I bought a loaf of store bought or store made bread for the first time in 5 years. And I was celebrating. I was taking pictures. There were high fives going on, and it was a loaf of bread. But it's just those small things to celebrate through recovery. But then there's also those tough days. There's the night, like I just mentioned, where I wasn't able to eat the ice cream cone, or we went out for donuts, and that guilt, that anxiety was still there. But I'm learning. I take every day as a learning opportunity, and I've replaced those high expectations as just kind of making it an adventure. I love to go out and take a hike, and I kind of compare recovery to taking a hike. We often worry about what's at the top and don't appreciate the beauty that's surrounding us on the way to the top. And that's what I'm doing. I strive to be recovered. I strive to get out of recovery one day. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know when that will happen. But along the way, I'm going to enjoy the ride. And it's conversations like this that kind of make that mantra come true because I am trusting being here, I'm embracing being here, and I'm enjoying being here. So I enjoy this opportunity to be able to share my story, and that helps guide me through my recovery.
Awesome. Um, Man, I know I did my recovery was with alcoholism. Um, and I know you talked where you hit rock bottom in your life, is what you described in that apartment.
Mm-hmm.
You hit rock bottom. And for me, I've hit rock bottom too. And it's always like that. I always have what I call a healthy fear almost of like, man, it's always possible
Right.
to go back there. And it's like, it's not the most pleasant feeling. Um, but it does make me appreciative of what I do have now, right?
Right.
And then it makes me know that, hey, this is within the realm of possibilities because you went through it.
Exactly.
And it kind of keeps you, it does keep you on a path almost, because now you do know that
Mm-hmm.
those things can happen, and if you don't like keep that whatever your routine or process is, um, that there is a risk of going back there. How
Mm-hmm.
do you deal with that yourself personally?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one for me because with OCD and with my eating disorder, I fell into the habit of routines.
Yeah.
So I almost have to have routines but not have routines.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
it's the same as with exercise. Everybody's like, "Oh, exercise is great for your mental health." And then I'm like, "Well, I was over exercising, so that's not good for my mental health."
Yeah.
But for me, it's just appreciating every day for what it is and to remind myself of how far I have come. And that has been my biggest fear as we kind of return back to normal again and the pandemic starts to ease because I've been in recovery under COVID. I've been able to avoid social situations because we've not been allowed to have them. And I worry about what is going to happen in my recovery once I do get back to normal life again and I'm at work 5 days a week and I'm going out with friends and traveling more. And I spoke to my therapist about it. I said I was very anxious, very nervous that, things were going to get back to normal and I was going to fall apart and just fall into old habits and old routines again. And he reminded me, he said, nobody can take away the last 9 months. And that's what I remind myself. Even if I do have a bad day, even if I do relapse, nobody can take away the last 9, 10 months now that I've had of growth because I can always go back to those lessons. They're
Yeah.
always going to be there. They're in my back pocket now. And that kind of gave me hope. That eased that worry and that anxiety and allowed me to kind of have a new perspective on the future.
Can you tell us about a truly joyous moment in your life and how that felt?
Yeah, so let's see. There's been quite a few of them lately, but I think I mentioned it. Just the indoor rock climbing. We tried that a couple weeks ago, and that was just pure joy because it was something that old Jason would have never done. I like to refer to myself now as Jason 2.0. And Jason 2.0 was just all about it. Usually, my fears, my anxieties, my insecurities would have prevented me from doing something like that. And when I did it and I started climbing, I realized how symbolic it was because I've had to overcome so much. I've been climbing nonstop for years. And it was fun to finally get to choose to climb. Rather than have to climb just to try to survive, I got to climb for fun. And to me, that was just pure joy to be able to celebrate that type of event with my husband and for him to just see how far I've come and to acknowledge it. And to share that memory together where finally my mind was free of orthorexia, free of anxiety. It was just me enjoying the moment.
What keeps you up at night?
Hmm. Not too much anymore. I am sleeping a lot better, but I will say that there is a need to make a difference. I started my blog and I started my mission to help other people, and that has just become my life's work. That's become my dedication now. And I'll lay there in bed and I'll think of ways that I can connect with more people because, especially as guys, we know that all too often guys just keep their emotions in. They keep their battles to themselves because they want to appear strong. And it is my mission to just break down that stereotype, break down that stigma. I mean, first of all, how many guys do you know that talk about having an eating disorder? There's not very many. And I want to be that guy. I want to be kind of that trailblazer to help other people reclaim their lives and to stop having to live with that mask on or those insecurities and those fears. And that keeps me up at night now because I feel a responsibility. I feel a duty having gone through everything I've gone through to now make the road a little bit easier for guys that are out there now.
What keeps you going every day?
it kind of relates back to the earlier question, but the connections, just the stories I get. I've been able to connect with several men now who said thank you for sharing your story. I've been battling an eating disorder, but when I went to look for help, or when I went to look for I guess approval, they kind of felt rejected because it's usually just skinny teenage females that we see. And they were like, you're a guy that's out there talking about an eating disorder. And just to have them be willing to open up to me and to be vulnerable with me, that just keeps me going because it's therapeutic. Here I am thinking I'm helping other people, but in the process I'm helping myself because it's reminding me that I'm not alone. So it goes back to that theory I have where we're all a community, where we all rely on each other. So those connections, that helps keep me going. And then, I mean, I gotta say too, my husband Matt, he has just been by my side the whole way. He's the one that opened my eyes to the problems that were going on, and his love and his support have never wavered. And I'm fortunate because I know a lot of people out there don't have that support system so close to them that I've been able to have. And he inspires me to be a better person, to be a better husband, to be a better man every single day.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
My only regret would be living a life controlled by fear and anxiety. As long as I continue to break free of that comfort zone and to get out of the box, I'm not going to have any regrets.
Perfect. You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
My dreams are to make a difference, to break down that stereotype, and to one day have men realize that the strongest man in the room is the one who's open and authentic. And I would love to speak about it. I have my book coming out later this year, which that alone is just a dream come true for me. And just any opportunity to help any individual's life in any way possible. If I could just make a difference in one person, then that's a life well lived.
You're the co-author of Your Life But. What's your picture perfect ending if you could just envision a scene?
If I could envision a scene to end my life, I'm going to have a lot of dogs because I love dogs. I'll probably be I guess, the dog man equivalent of a cat lady. But I just see me and Matt just enjoying our lives, just cherishing the memories that we were able to share, and just being surrounded by love, being surrounded by our friends and the people that know us the best. And to just be able to sit there and look back at what we've accomplished and smile and laugh and just still feel young. I never want to feel old. I just always want to have that spirit about me, that curiosity about me.